Welcome to the Wealth Renegade podcast. I'm your host, Robbie Butler. Have you celebrated your financial independence today? On today's episode, we're going to talk about the Family Office Club conference that I went to in December of this year. In December, the Family Office Club hosts its annual Super Summit every single year. Though Y Street Capital has attended for the past 6 years, this was my first experience getting to go to a conference down in Florida with, about 700 or so in-person attendees, with an additional 300 at least attending online. This event is extremely well marketed. So if you look up Family Office Club, you'll start to see, in essence, what I was able to experience. The professionals presenting on stage, interacting in the audience, sitting at lunches and dinners, and making connections about investment structure, opportunity, strategy, networks, pitfalls, areas to avoid, assets to focus on, industries to capitalize. So I mentioned structures. That's a whole nother layer of conversation. All of these different categories were an unbelievable level of experience and high quality to be able to explore with the attendees. So, some things to share. What's a family office, first of all? If you've heard that term, you'll be at least somewhat aware that it centers around a concept of wealth. We can use the term generational wealth wherever we want. It's thrown around in today's wealth building industry too casually. A family office is a group that succeeds to some degree at accomplishing generational wealth. What it looks like is when a family has roughly $30 million in net worth, and typically this begins with a patriarch or a matriarch, someone who has got a business that has been extremely successful, or they've been extremely disciplined and focused on their investment strategy, so it has produced massive results, roughly, measurably, a $30 million net worth. Now they're going to start hiring people to bring it all in-house. They're going to have employees who are dedicating 100% of their working time to maintaining and producing the family's investment strategy. Typically, you don't do this for just one generation. Typically, this occurs after someone has had enough decades of experience that they say, not only do I want to hand this over to my kids, but this inheritance is going to come with it a responsibility to maintain that, which is why the family starts to hire employees. Perhaps this is a chief investment officer, perhaps it's an in-house personal assistant who's going to start to arrange the family's retreats and travel. Now, that describes the wealth function, which most people are familiar with, but a family office has got a much bigger imperative in their charter, and that is to maintain the family's values, their investment mandate, their need to organize their family, aunts, uncles, cousins, children, grandchildren, the fourth generation, in order to perpetuate the vision of the family. So there's a value structure, there's a vision structure, there is often investment mandates which describe that this is what we're going to invest in, this is what we're not going to invest in, and there's an asset allocation piece as well. How are we going to maintain the parts we're responsible for? How are we going to maintain, for example, the family business, the core piece that built the wealth in the first place? We can look at examples of well-known families in the world. Let's say the Carnegies, the Vanderbilts, the Rockefellers. Those are all excellent examples of family offices in some degree. Not all of them are excellent examples because given that those family offices are so big, you can find examples of where the wealth was lost and perhaps gained again and perhaps lost again. There are complexities to what most family offices are trying to accomplish, which causes them to stumble. The Family Office Club, the event I went to in December, is designed to help families perpetuate their family office without some of those pitfalls, learning from fellow family offices that have learned these lessons and have built good investment charters that have helped them to focus on what they are good at, maintain their core business, have their diversified portfolio, have their real estate portfolio, and build structures and strategies that will perpetuate the wealth and not mess it up. So This term generational wealth is thrown around, but a family office is someone who is preparing to perpetuate it successfully. Now, one of my best takeaways was on that main point. I knew going in that values are important, business values are important. I even knew that in a family structure where you are building some family wealth, you want to have those values so that you can help your children to be the best person they can be and appropriately handle the wealth that you have built. That was clear to me. What was not clear to me was how you actually need to determine the strength of someone's commitment to values. When a family office is working, they will eventually find partners. They'll find legal partners, tax partners, investment partners, perhaps travel partners. They will add strategic relationships into their family office, sometimes through hiring, sometimes through a typical business to business relationship in order to accomplish what the family wants. Let's say your family wants to go to Belize every single year for a 1-day retreat to discuss what the family will accomplish in the next 1 year, 5-year, 10-year plan. And so you're organized and you've got that travel function, but you're a successful business person. You do not want to organize that travel for your family. But if it's going to happen every year and perhaps there are quarterly Zoom meetings and perhaps your local family has needs, you'll hire someone or you'll hire a firm to actually manage that travel. It's easy when you're traveling with 10 family members, but let's imagine you have 30. Now, that person can basically take on a full-time job in order to manage your family's travel. How do you know that you're going to hire the right person or the right firm? It goes back to values and the process to determine whether someone is in line with your values was maybe my favorite takeaway of the Family Office Club Super Summit. The way that they recommend it is they ask, let's say that I've got a written value that is honesty. I value honesty. It is top 5 for me. My family is honest. I am honest. And it is critical that the people I work with are honest as well. So someone who comes in and says, "Yes, we want to be your investment advisor. We want to be your travel advisor." Of course, they're going to ask or they're going to say, "Yes, we're honest." When you ask them, "Do they value honesty?" Everyone will say that. Everyone will say they value discipline. They'll say, "We value a transparency. We value values that are that sound good." Anyone would agree with. So when someone says that, the next step is you need to ask them for specific case studies of how those values were implemented in detail, in explicit detail. Give me a crucial example of where honesty played into a business decision you made very recently and what happened afterwards. That storytelling process will help you to vet where people were honest and where they were not. It is not foolproof, of course, but anyone can agree that, yes, I'm generous. Yes, I'm magnanimous. I am sincere. I am perhaps a Christian. Give me the stories. Give me the exact detail. And then the second layer is you go and ask their references for stories of where they were honest, for stories of who they were. Because it's very easy to say, "Oh, we're a successful investment firm. We have 400 billion assets under management," or "We have 40 years of experience." Both of those things very easy to quantify when you're at the professional level, but you can still make enormous mistakes when you don't align well on the values. But telling the stories of the firm's experience from the context of values makes for a much smoother onboarding and offboarding process. Mismatches in values will cause damage that will go much further than the damage that perhaps a poor investment makes. To transition from that primary lesson learned, I actually think that concept of missing bad investments was my second major takeaway from the Family Office Club Super Summit. It was said on stage that it is much better to miss a bad investment than it is to make a good investment. Making a good investment makes you a return on your money. In White Street's Capital portfolio, we typically return 20%. annual to our investors. That's a great investment. But the damage that a bad investment does is so much more severe. It demands so much more time, additional resources, perhaps total loss of capital. All of those factors are so impactful when you experience a bad investment that it was a truism across the conference that it is better to miss a bad investment than it is to make a good investment. So when you enter this space, 20% is a reasonable expectation for a high quality investment opportunity. So we don't stand out very much. But what I can say with confidence to the investors that I speak with at these types of conferences is we are so committed to investor capital that your your capital is safe. You are protected from the bad investment, the thing which is so much worse than the good investment. And I can speak about that confidently. That insight made so much sense to me, and it has shaped much more of how I work with our investors. Because for you, if you are making a bad investment, if you are in process to make a bad investment, anytime it is the time to pull the plug. The moment you have that inkling, you should be yanking that plug in order to stop the process of what is bad, even if it means you're going to lose, let's say, 10% of your expected return. So your expected return drops from 20% per year to 10% per year. But to stop it from slipping further and further is so wise because the time and the anguish of the bad investments do so much more collateral damage. So that was a second major takeaway for me. The third major takeaway was how careful investors, how careful each of us has to be about who we partner with. There were people who got on stage, who were invited on stage at the Family Office Club Super Summit, who never should have been there. They likely lied and cheated in order to get their 5 minutes in the sun. And unfortunately for them, most people realized by the end of their presentation that this was a shyster. This was someone who was dishonest. This was someone who did not have the necessary experience to speak to an audience of 500 or 700 people, but they still were there. That was astounding to me. And yet, it made me realize how careful we have to be with our partnerships going forward to a whole new level. To have someone stand on stage, as an example, this is an actual quote from the conference, and say, "My investment produces a near infinite IRR," is breaking the rules of math. And yet, it was designed to elicit a response from the audience. That person equally teared up on stage in order to try and elicit an emotional response to build a connection with the audience. But the more we listened, the more ludicrous it got. And so they were yanked off stage. The video recording was not released, and that was the end of the experience for the audience members like myself. But being so clear about what is good for each investor and then being patient to miss the bad investments was the major takeaway from this conference because I then went and listened in the audience to bad investments being marketed on stage. Finally, I could tell you more funny stories. So for you listening at home, reach out to me and I'll happily share more of what I learned and more of the amusing, the fascinating, the ultra unique assets and opportunities that were presented on stage. But those major takeaways of being really sincere about what values do you hold and where are you going to demand that your partners hold them as well was a fascinating takeaway. Looking forward to the next Family Office Club event. Thanks for listening.